Shalom and welcome to what I hope will be the first installment of a podcast series looking at some of the most misunderstood or misinterpreted books of the Bible. Tonight I want to start with none other than Igrat HaGelutia, otherwise known as the Letter to or the Book of Galatians. I frequently get asked questions about this book, and I've been asked to do something on my channel as it's a book that tends to be a source of frustration for people that are coming into the knowledge of the Torah. There are certain expressions, phrases and concepts explored throughout the Book of Galatians that unnecessarily cause many people problems theologically, such as the phrase the works of the law, the subject of legalism, and circumcision, to name a few. But before I start, it's extremely important to note that the books of the Netzrim Ketuvim, that is the Nazarene writings, otherwise known as the so-called New Testament, at one point in history fell completely into the hands of the Catholic Church, and it's very difficult to navigate one's way through a reliable translation. Orthodox Judaism don't have that issue so much because they have an interesting halakha that deals with such a situation, and I'd like to share it. In the books of the Apocrypha, a collection of works that once sat between the book of Malachi and the book of Matthew, there is a work called the First and Second Book of Maccabees, which recounts the story of the battles and eventual victory of Judah against the Syrian Greeks, and it's a very significant event in Jewish history. It's a story about Jews, written by Jews and for Jews, yet it was rejected as Jewish canon. A copy will never be found in any Orthodox Jewish bookstore, but there are plenty of Haggadic stories and children's books describing the events, sometimes in great detail. This is probably the most Jewish book you will ever read, dealing with a cruel extermination attempt of the people of Israel, but the Orthodox Jewish world do not touch it. This also goes for works such as the Book of Enoch, and most, if not all, the other so-called lost books of the Bible. The Jews believe that there are no translations of these volumes that are completely free of serious errors due to the nature of many translations only existing in Greek. Now, there are many other theories floating around of why the books of the Apocrypha and the lost books of the Bible were rejected. Some reasons are valid, but there can be multiple reasons, but some more the reason than others, if that makes sense. But am I saying that we shouldn't study the Netzrim Ketuvim based on this information? Well, no, but I'm saying to be extremely careful, and any passage that seems to call the Torah into question should be studied very, very carefully. The books of the Netzrim Ketuvim make up 22% of the overall Bible, and my question is, how much time do most people spend in this 22%? Well, if they're Christians, few would argue most of the time. On top of this, if we restore the books of the Apocrypha, this drops the percentage down to a further 19%. And some might argue valiantly that the Netzrim Ketuvim contains mostly references from the Tanakh, and around 30% or slightly more of prophetic fulfillments contained in the Tanakh, and studying it doesn't hurt someone's knowledge of the Tanakh and should actually enhance it. And this is correct and should actually be the case, but unfortunately, due to the church and their replacement theological influence, it largely results in having a negative interpretation of the Tanakh, otherwise known as the Old Testament. This is a shining, irrefutable fact, and don't be frightened to say this, it's the truth, and few people have the guts to say it, so please bear this in mind as we go forward. Shaul HaShliach, otherwise known as the Apostle Paul, wrote the Book of Galatians as well as the Book of Romans and the Book of Hebrews, all of which were written to various Netzarim communities dealing with various issues. These were originally letters addressed to certain communities regarding crucial matters that had come to the fore in the early formation of this offshoot sect of Judaism. It's important to establish that the letter to the Galatians is written with the assumption that one is also familiar with the letter to the Roman Jews, as there are many themes that are repeated and expanded in it. The letter to the Galatians was written to the elders of Galatia, of course, and it is responding to a radical works of the law sect of the Essenes, who had circulated a scroll known today as the 4QMMT document within their community. These communities were heavily populated by foreigners to Judaism who had little prior understanding of the Torah, or at least how to apply it. And as such, they were given a partial conversion status similar to a slave, having few observances incumbent upon them, similar to that of an Orthodox Jewish woman. Nonetheless, their status was as full members of the Commonwealth of the House of Israel, so many were on the same level as Noahites, those who keep the 7 laws of Noah, but some of, if not most of these, were handled with the intention to observe more Torah within each person's means and circumstance. The 4QMMT document was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls found in Cave 4 at Qumran, between the years of 1953 and 1959. And the document deals with a concept called the works of the law and was believed to be written by an extremist sect of Essenes and originally directed at the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, imploring them to be far stricter in the application of certain purity laws. This is somewhat ironic because it means in a sense that Rav Shaul is defending a secondary target audience in his letter to Galatia, the first target audience of the QMMT being the Pharisees and some of the pure priestly class of the Jews. I can guarantee you that the amount of people familiar with the book of Galatians almost completely eclipses the handful of people familiar with the 4QMMT document. And the result is an ongoing ill-equipped defense of a book from a people to a people who don't even really know what the book is written in response to. So just to be clear, Rav Shaul is rebuking some of the practices of a radical Essene doctrine and not Pharisaic Judaism. So Rav Shaul obviously became aware that the congregation in Galatia had been sent a copy of the 4QMMT document by this radical works of the law Essene counterpart or counterparts to Shaul. The person or persons that influenced the congregation in Galatia represented a group within the Essenes that believed one could obtain righteousness through adhering to certain purity regulations that they felt the Pharisees were being too lax about. And by observing these purity laws with great precision, they believed that one would actually be declared righteous before Hashem. So the works of the law is a phrase that is in reference to certain purity laws outside of the Nazarene writings in an Essene scroll that was discovered in Qumran. So the phrase the works of the law never shows up in rabbinic Jewish writings anywhere. It is absolutely frightening to think that there are so many people out there who are familiar with the book of Galatians, but very few actually know what this book is arguing against. Now, who were the Galatians? Well, they were a bunch of Gauls originally from the north of the Black Sea that split off from a main migration of people and settled in Asia Minor in the 3rd century BC. They were originally a colony of Gauls that made their way across what we now call modern-day Turkey. And the Gauls were also known as the Celts, which is why the language of the Celts is known as Gaelic or Gaulish. They also migrated across the English Channel and eventually settled in France, and then after that pushed into the Isles and became the Irish and the Scottish people. This is historically who the Gauls were. So the community being addressed is in Asia Minor and was called Galatia. By the way, one of the Latin words for France is Gallia. It is also believed that the people of Gallia were originally Galileans. The Galileans, that is the members of the lost 10 tribes who were exiled by the Assyrians to various locations just north of Assyria itself. Interestingly, Obadiah 1:20 says that some of the lost 10 tribes were exiled to many places, among them a place called Zarephath. And the Jewish sage Rashi identifies the place of Zarephath as the Kingdom of France. There are 3 major misinterpretations of the book of Galatians out there. The main one is the Christian interpretation that believes it's aimed at defending the Christian belief against rabbinic Judaism and that Shaul is outlining the tenets of the faith of Christianity. Some people even believe that he is defending the sect of the Nazarenes against the Talmud, which is insane because the Talmud hadn't even been written then. And the concept of Christianity didn't really exist at that time. The actual word Christianity does not appear in the Netzrim Ketuvim, only the word Christian 3 times, which would have been Moshiach in Hebrew, which means anointed ones in plural, and in the 3 locations that it is used in a derisory manner. The other 2 lesser known misinterpretations come from information that has circulated throughout the Messianic community. One is from the standpoint that Shaul is teaching a form of charism, which was a sect of Jews diametrically opposed to rabbinic Judaism. The other view, which was published in book format, tries to roll the Torah into the narrative, but still is unaware of the exact cause of the letter's inception. This was later revised to align with the aforementioned Karaite view in a later edition. The book itself is called Understanding the Book of Galatia, and it's written by Avi ben Mordecai, and the other individual responsible for the Karaite view originally is Nehemiah Gordon. Now, Avi ben Mordecai interpreted the book initially to be aimed at another less observant form of Judaism, and he later revised the work to align with Nehemiah Gordon after spending time with him. So it's important to know that Nehemiah Gordon is not a messianic believer. He doesn't believe in Yeshua, and his only interest in the Nazarene texts is for the purpose of legitimizing the false narrative of Karaite Judaism. And if he can convince people to believe that Yeshua was a Karaite, it's only a short jump from there to get people to become become Karaites, whether they believe in Yeshua or not. So all these three interpretations that I've outlined here are false and will only lead a person into more confusion and frustration. This can be proven because, as I've said, the phrase the works of the law never shows up in any rabbinic writings at all. It's aimed against a radical breakaway sect of Essenes. Let's be 100% crystal clear that Shaul is dealing with Essene doctrine here, not Pharisaic doctrine. So the 4QMMT, also known as the works of the law, talks about many of the same topics in the letter to the Galatians, but from the opposite point of view. If you like the content of this channel, get a hold of this book. It is literally jam-packed with information you will not find in most Torah publications. Its pages include topics like the fable of the money-hungry Jew, the lie that propelled the Holocaust, the real root of anti-Semitism, rightly dividing Mashiach, which contains startling truths about the Messiah you will not read anywhere else, Judaism in the New Testament, updated information about the creation of the Golem and the false Messiah, the commandment to wage war, the truth about the shield of David, a compendium of all the false teachings in the Messianic movement to help you navigate what is truth, biblical capital punishment, and why you should be frightened of sinning, the significance of the land of Israel, the obligations of the student, the eye in the triangle, sanctified sex, how to think like a Jew, and much, much more. There is also an updated chapter 1, and along with all the other chapters, has hundreds of footnotes and references. This is a book that took 10 years to research and compile, and will be a welcome addition to the library of any discerning student of Torah and Mashiach. Get it today on Amazon and other online bookstores. Bye for now.